Hi, and welcome to today's edition of the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. I'm Kat Kalashian. I'm based in Europe, in Paris, France specifically. And I've recently gotten a question sent in by one of our readers asking about how to travel for cheap in Europe, how to reduce your expenses when traveling either as a tourist or as a potential new resident here in Europe. So I took some time to think about how to best optimize your trip, including how to save on some costs when it's possible. So the first thing that comes before you make your trip. So before you even look at where in the city you'll stay, before you look at what kind of accommodation you'll stay in the city, you need to look at where in the city you'll be staying, or in the town or the countryside or wherever it is you're looking at going. And the key here is doing some research before you actually make your move. So if you're coming as a tourist, for example, you don't want to be 30 minutes from all of the major sites or from the heart of town, because you'll waste a lot of time commuting. It'll also cost some money, of course, commuting to and from all of these sites every day from wherever in the city you are. So if you are a tourist, you probably want to be as close to the center of the city and the main sites, monuments, museums that you're most excited to see. You want to be as near to those as you can. Of course, the nearer you are to all of these things, the more expensive your hotel or your home rental might be. But you'll have to factor in the fact that if you're staying farther away, you're probably going to end up spending the same amount on commuting, as well as losing time, which, as we know, when we're traveling, time is possibly our most precious commodity. So look up where you want to stay, make sure that you're near the things, or that there's a good, cheap way of getting to the things you want to go to. And of course, if you're looking at this from the perspective of a potential new resident, you want to do lots of research to know where in the city or where in the countryside, the town, you think you would be most happy. It would be a big waste of time and money to spend time in a place that you would have known that you would hate had you just read a little bit about it before you went. So don't dive in, don't look before you leap, but basically and do your due diligence before you book anything. When it comes to booking, I will say that you should just forget about hotels entirely. Home rentals, whether it's through Airbnb, VRBO, homestay, home away, whatever it is, there are many different names for all of them in many different countries. That's where you want to be focusing your time and attention when it comes to looking at where to stay. Even if the nightly rate is about the same, which usually you can, there's a lot more choice for homestays. So you can usually get a much cheaper rate, a much better rate for the same part of town for, a great place to stay. But even if the nightly rate is the same, consider the fact that you, for example, will be able to eat breakfast in your own home. You can go to the grocery store, buy a few yogurts, some fruit, a loaf of bread, whatever it is. You can make coffees, teas. It's your base where you can save money by going to the grocery store and eating out of your home, at least for a few meals. In fact, if you are looking at this trip, if this trip is for you mostly about a potential move, then I recommend cooking in as much as you're eating out, because it'll be a good learning experience for you to have in the bag. If you're a tourist, of course, eating out is probably half of the fun of why you're there. Still, I wouldn't discount. I actually think going to grocery stores in other countries, as odd as it sounds, is one of the more fun, obscure things to do. I actually have to do it for work much of the time when I'm in a place to write about it. But even when I'm not, I enjoy going to different grocery stores in different countries, seeing the different products, seeing the way that the store is designed, even the way that the food is laid out. It really gives you a funny insight into the local people. What's first? Is produce the first thing you see when you enter the store, or is it wine? If you're in a place that has great, fantastic markets for produce, or if you're in Spain, markets of, jamons and quesos, then you're probably going to want to do some shopping there. And it's much nicer to have a home to go to where you have a kitchen with a refrigerator, first of all, but also cutting boards, knives. It's nice to be able to do that. I really appreciate the freedom of having a home stay over a hotel. But the real practical point there is that you're saving some money if you're eating, even if it's just breakfasts in, even if you're just taking your coffee in the house. Not that I think you shouldn't go out and have a coffee in your destination. That's going to be half the fun of it too. So you want to play that and play that balancing game about making sure that you really do experience everything that your destination has to offer, while pinching some pennies here and there where it's not painful. So even if you're not cooking, another thing to keep in mind is leftovers. This didn't used to be a concern in Europe 10 years ago. Leftovers weren't a thing. Europeans have never heard of a doggy bag, and to take home food, I really 10 years ago, it was unheard of. I forgot where I was, and I was in a little French cafe and asked to take home the steak that I had only half eaten and I didn't want to waste. And the guy looked at me like I was out of my mind. First of all, how did I not finish my food? You know, in France, that's a big faux pas. You eat what's on your plate. You don't come and nibble or pick at your plate and then go home. So that already was a little bit offensive to him, but then to ask for it to go. So he did, in the end, he was accommodating enough, but all he did was grab some foil from the kitchen and wrap it up. And I went home with, a slab of steak and foil in my hand as I walked home. So nowadays, though, that's no longer the case. And it is pretty typical to be able to ask for food to go. If you haven't finished something, most people are more than happy to pack it up for you, even if they don't have actual takeout things, a food box to put it in. Often here in Paris, for example, if I go out with my daughter and she can't finish all of her little macaroni and cheese, they'll give her, a cup of yogurt, or, it used to be a cup of yogurt from the kitchen, and they'll pour all the rest in so we can take it home. So it's still not, in Paris, in France at least, I'll say it's still not totally mainstream to get food to go, as you can see by people ad-libbing how they give you your food to go home. But it is more typical. And so that's another little thing to keep in mind, is that you can take home your food, eat it later, put it in the fridge, eat it the next day. You don't have to leave it sitting on the table. If you're in a hotel, people don't typically take leftovers home to their hotel. So just little things to keep in mind. The many reasons that a homestay can be a much better option than a hotel for saving money. The other point is that the parts of town that you want to stay in, most hotels, of course, there's hotels. If you're staying in a big city, there's hotels all over the city. But many hotels, especially the ones that you'd want to stay in, are going to be grouped in the more touristed parts of town, which are the more expensive parts of town. The homestays that you'll be able to find maybe are often in more residential parts of town, whether it's in the city or the countryside or whatever. They're not meant necessarily for tourists because they were bought by locals. Locals live in them probably for part of the year. And so you'll be in already a cheaper part of town if you're staying in a homestay. So the cafe on the corner, the newsstand, the restaurants around you, those are all going to reflect the prices of a more residential local neighborhood rather than a touristy neighborhood that sees mostly foreigners. When it comes to getting around, I've mentioned already that you want to make sure that you are well positioned in the place where you're looking to go so that you're not spending tons of time and money on commutes. The best way to commute in Europe by far in almost every scenario in cities is by foot. Most European cities nowadays are designed for pedestrians and for bikers. So increasingly, in fact, it's becoming very difficult to use a car in cities. Most big European cities are trying to phase out car use, vehicles in general, and trying to turn more and more of their vehicle space, whether that's streets or parking garages or parking lots, whatever it is, they're trying to reclaim those for residents and turn them into green spaces, which has the dual effect of, being a great amenity for residents and also, helping everybody and the planet by getting rid of some of the cars and the vehicles that are used in cities. If you can't use your feet or, if you're not able to walk around all day long, bikes are another great option. Almost anywhere you go in Europe, there's going to be some kind of bike sharing system. Usually they're made to be pretty accessible for tourists. 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. I remember trying to figure out bike rentals here in Paris when I wasn't living here, and I could not figure it out. They're much easier now. And I think most cities, as I say in the world, not only have them as an option, but also encourage their use by having great bike lanes, by pedestrianizing or, bikeifying, by making parts of the city non-accessible for vehicles for, say, Sundays. That's an increasing tradition all around the world. So bikes are another great way to get around, and they are very turnkey. Pick them up and drop them off in any part of the city that you go to. So that's a really nice way to get around a longer distance, go a bit faster, and then just drop the bike off at its parking spot and you don't have to worry about it. Failing, and also, of course, the bikes and using your own feet allow you to see what's around you. And in most European cities, that's practically half the fun. That's half the sightseeing, is just walking down the street, enjoying these open air museums. And so you can, it's almost like three birds with one stone. You're getting from point A to B, you're using your feet or biking, and so you're being healthy, you're getting a bit of a workout. And three, you're actually able to see everything around you. You're checking off a mark on an item on a tourist list, things that most people on the get hop on, hop off buses, that's what they're doing. They're just doing it at a faster pace when they can't really see or enjoy anything. Not that I am disparaging hop on, hop off buses. I love them. I take them everywhere I go. But if you are trying to just commute, definitely feet and biking is the best way to get around. Most European countries, I would say all European countries, especially in Western Europe, have some of the best public transportation systems and networks in the world. So whether it's the countrywide train system or the citywide metro system, this part of the world has turned public transport into an art, whereas in the US, the art is more in the highways and byways and driveways and all of the different ways that a vehicle can get from point A to B. The point here in Europe is to eliminate the vehicles from the equation and to help you get from point A to point B without needing any other kind of assistance. You'd be astounded at some of the options in public transport, depending on where you are in Europe. You've got metros, buses, of course, but also funiculars, ferries, water taxis, and of course the trains and the trams. So no matter, whatever the distance, whether you're going far or keeping it in the city, I really, really recommend you try to use the public transportation options as opposed to an Uber or a taxi or anything else that costs a lot more money. Eating out, I have some good tips here. If you are on an eating out budget, so I've already said, if you're coming at this from the view of a potential resident, you really do want to eat in as much as you eat out, because eating out, obviously, it costs more money. It is more of an indulgence. It's more of a touristy activity than something that a resident would do every day of the week, for example. So it gives you a better feel for how life would actually be, and what life would actually be like to go grocery shopping, what your expenses would actually look like if you're making an effort to eat in. If you're a tourist, on the other hand, you might just be, half the fun, half the reason, maybe more than half the reason of going to a new place is to experience its food. So don't deny yourself that. But if you do have a budget for it, I have some good tips. First of all, never eat within a few blocks of any tourist destination. So that can be difficult. For example, in Paris, it's a small, compact city, and pretty much all of it has some kind of a tourist site. So try and just get a few blocks beyond the tourist sites, a few blocks beyond the crowds. Even that little bit of distance is going to help you with the price. Even sometimes just crossing the street can make a big difference in price. But if you can't, if you've been out all day touristing and you're just absolutely famished, you can't make it another step without eating, then you allow yourself to eat near a tourist place, but don't go for local food. So taking the France example further, don't go to the little Parisian bistro right next to Sacré-Cœur or Notre Dame or the Louvre, because they don't need to work to get tourists in the door, right? All they have to do is say, hey, we have French food, and you're here in France, you want French food, come in the door and eat, and let us charge you 3 times as much for really bad microwaved food. Instead of that, maybe try the little Mexican place or the bakery or the Greek place serving gyros. They're all over Europe. You'll find no shortage of kebab places or gyro places. And these places, even if you're next to a tourist location, they're probably more authentic than the French food that you've got around you. You'll find them all over any city. Really great value, usually really good food. They're not all great, of course, but I can almost guarantee that going to a little hole in the wall taco joint next to, the big tourist attraction, that's going to be a better meal than if you tried to get the French food next door. And the reason is that if they're selling food that isn't French, it's got to be a certain amount of good to have managed to keep their real estate. You know, if they weren't doing enough business, if their food wasn't good enough, they wouldn't be doing enough business, and it would have just been ousted for another, you know, cut and paste French bistro. So you know that they're usually a little bit more authentic. They usually have a better quality. The local style places near tourist sites, I mean, they're really focused on speed and appealing to international tastes, not necessarily authenticity. So I won't say that you shouldn't eat there or that the food will be terrible, but it certainly won't be the most authentic or high quality meal that you've had in France. And really, they're trying to just, you know, burn and churn. They're just trying to get you in the door and back out again to bring in new people. So another great tip is if you are on an eating out budget, you don't necessarily need to avoid eating out, but you could avoid eating out at night, where prices tend to double from lunchtime prices. So one of my favorite things to do here in Paris or anywhere in Europe is to go out and have lunches. And often, most cities, especially, this isn't true in the countryside, for example, but most cities offer what's here in Paris, it's called a business lunch often. In Latin America, it's called ejecutivo, the executive, you know. So many places around the world offer these kinds of business lunches that are meant to attract people who only have an hour on their lunch break. And so they'll, you know, guarantee that they can get you this nice meal and you're in and out the door in an hour to get back to work. But this isn't a burn and churn kind of thing. This is a kind of tradition. And here in Europe, it's still focused on really enjoying your meal and really taking that moment out of the day. So it's not about getting the fastest salad, you know, soup and a sandwich kind of thing and getting you back out the door. You sit down. You might have a glass of wine. In fact, the menu might even offer the option to come with a glass of wine. But usually the menu is either a starter and a main course, or a main course and a dessert, or you could get all three. And for the price that they'll offer you is generally very, very affordable and definitely going to be probably around half the cost of the similar menu that they would offer in the evenings. And plus, you know that you can get in and out kind of quickly. So as a tourist, that's always nice to know that, I mean, unless you want to have a nice long leisurely lunch, which is its own pleasure. But if you're out touristing and you've got a schedule and lots of things to do, it's nice to know that you can go in, get a really good, high quality, authentic meal and be out the door in an hour or so. And again, a lot of those menus do offer wine or a coffee at the end or whatever. Here in Europe, we like to enjoy wine throughout the day, even if it's a business day, even if we're coming back to work. So don't be surprised if you see a bunch of people in suits sharing a bottle at lunchtime. Just be wary around construction sites after lunch. No, I'm joking. But it's a great way to just really enjoy a really nice meal at a fraction of the cost. So again, just to sum up, if you are on an eating out budget, maybe buy your groceries. You're in an Airbnb, buy your groceries and cook your meals at night. But maybe buy a local cookbook, try some local recipes, or buy some takeout food. Excuse me. But eat your lunches out, and that's the best way to get the bang for your buck when it comes to eating out. Another couple of pointers. Ask for tap water instead of bottled water, except in Italy. I would say Italy is a big exception here. Everyone drinks bottled water in Italy, no matter who they are. I don't even know if there's a word for tap water in Italy, but water is so cheap. Really, really good quality water is incredibly cheap. And so people would look at you funny if you tried to ask for tap water, or if you were with locals and you said, you know, how do I ask for tap water? Or I don't want bottled water, just give me tap water. I think they would look at you funny, like they didn't really even understand the question. Everywhere else in Europe, though, in my experience, it's mostly just tourists who drink bottled water. And most waiters know this. So if you seem foreign, they might just bring you a bottle of water without asking. So it can help to look up ahead of time what the term is to ask for tap water. In France, you wouldn't say tap water. There's no real translation for tap water. What you ask for is a carafe of water. So you'd ask for une carafe d'eau. And you should look up how to say that, or what is the typical way to ask for that in other countries. Because, right, if you were trying to just Google translate tap water and ask for that here in Paris, people might not understand you either. But anyone in the world will understand a carafe of water. You can also do this for wine, especially here in France, but also throughout Europe. You can ask for a pichet is like a small carafe. And in fact, there are about a dozen different levels of sizes of carafe. And if you come to France and you look around some of the tourist shops, they sell towels or placemats that show all of the various sizes of carafes going up and all of their different names. Many menus will also show the names of the different carafes. So they'll show on the wine list, they'll show glass, and then the next line is pichet. Next line is the one I can't remember, and then the next line is grande carafe, and then the next line is bottle. So on a wine list, you might actually have 6+ options for sizes of wine that you could get, but the way to save a bit of money is to order a small carafe instead of 2 glasses, or a large carafe instead of a bottle, because it's about the same amount of volume, but much cheaper than ordering either way separately. All right, so let's zoom back out a little bit more. So those are my very specific tips for, how to book your trip, how to be wherever it is that you are. Let's talk a little bit now about where to go on a budget. So the farther east you go, the cheaper things get. So this is a general truism in Europe, which means that Central Europe and Eastern Europe are a fraction of the cost of Western Europe, and they're a great value. Some of these places have the most incredible cultures and histories and lifestyles to offer that are totally underappreciated. So they are, just bargain basement prices, really. So the Czech Republic, Hungary, Romania, Poland. I understand that maybe with the Ukrainian war, people are a little bit more leery of going that far east. I can say that I was in Cyprus in the past few months while the Ukrainian war has been going on, and Cyprus is about as far east as you can go before you get into Israel and Turkey. So I felt nothing of it there. Poland, might be different right now. So these things, maybe you want to take a look at the news cycle before you go, but I personally wouldn't take any of these countries off of my personal travel list right now. I'm actually planning a trip to Poland as we speak. I'll probably be there in December of this year. I have no qualms about it. I've spoken to people living there, expats and locals, and I have no reason to think that there's anything to be worried about or concerned about going that far east. So just a little disclaimer, because you really shouldn't discount this part of the world. It's a fabulous place to visit, a great place to live, and should not be discounted just because they were part of the Eastern Bloc once upon a time, or, of whatever else is going on right now. A little bit further to the west, I'll call this the Adriatic area, Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro. These are all wonderful, fantastic, little tiny gems of countries. They're all right along the coast, the Adriatic coast, and they are still affordable. They're still as affordable as some of the other more easterly countries I was just mentioning, but they are not going to remain so for much longer. They're already hitting the mainstream. They're already making headlines, earning awards internationally, and people are increasingly aware of these countries. So if you want to get in on the ground floor, go now. These places are only going to become more popular and more expensive. Also, just to put a little plug in, the cuisine in this part of the world is fantastic. You can get a chef's tasting menu, for example, for like 30 euros. Add a carafe of wine for another 5 or 10. So huge portions, much bigger portions than in Western Europe, and fantastic food that is really, international chef quality, but at insanely low prices that make me, wish that I could eat all day long. If you have your heart set on more Western Europe, then there are some other little pointers that can help you save some money. So Iberia generally is much cheaper than the rest of Western Europe. The figures are generally 20 to 30% lower among all costs. So going from accommodations down to utilities to food and entertainment, 20 to 30% is about how much cheaper they say Iberia is than the rest of Western Europe. This is especially true outside of major cities. So if you're in a small town, they can be, small towns in Spain or Portugal can be downright cheap. Even the big cities, though, are much cheaper than other big Western European cities. So, for example, Barcelona is much cheaper than Paris. So is Lisbon. Both are world-class, gorgeous cosmopolitan cities with so much to offer and come at a fraction of the cost. If you're looking at France, I would suggest that you stay you stay west of Montpellier. So think of Montpellier as the middle line through the southern coast of France, and everything to the east is quite expensive. This is Cannes and Nice and Monaco, Monaco's its own country, but that's the direction we're heading in. That kind of chic, rich kind of lifestyle. It's all basically been mapped out. People have been living there for a long time. The prices are not going down anytime soon. They'll probably only continue to go up. However, on the other side of Montpellier, the Spain side, it's a totally different world. It's a completely underrated, underknown, and underpriced part of the southern French coast, and really offers a great lifestyle. Occitanie, for example, is one of the regions there, and it's one of my favorite regions in France outside of Paris. It's also on the coast, so you've got the coast right there, but you've also got tons of these really cute little market towns and a fabulous, very laid-back village-style kind of lifestyle, as well as the coastal lifestyle. So there's still plenty to be had in the south of France, even if you take out everything that is east of Montpellier. The eastern coast of Italy, on the other hand, is the cheaper side. So the Rome side, the western side of Italy, tends to be a little bit more trafficked historically, whereas the other side sees fewer visitors, which means that it stays cheaper. Abruzzo, again, is one of my favorite regions in Italy, and it's completely unknown. It's about 2 hours from Rome. It's a straight shot across the calf of the boot. And once you get there, you are within driving distance of gorgeous, pristine beaches, but also skiing in the mountains. It's a really fantastic place with tons and tons to offer, and it comes at a fraction of the price. Make sure to capitalize on picnicking and free sites. So this obviously is weather dependent, but most people travel in the spring and the summer and in the fall rather than in winter. And if that's the case for you, make sure that you go to the parks, grab a towel and a book and a baguette, a bottle of wine, for less than €5. A hunk of cheese, a baguette, and a bottle of wine you can get for less than €10, and it would all be really, really good. And you can go and spend a day in the park, and odds are that park itself is its own, item on a tourist's list. So you could go and just enjoy the afternoon and have a nice, very local experience while checking off a tourist to-do item for free. The other thing you can do is visit all the major sites and stay on the outside. So many of them, it depends on where your priorities lie. But many sites, as all over Europe, you can get the gist of them from the outside. So the Colosseum, there's not a whole lot different to see on the inside of the Colosseum than there is on the outside of the Colosseum. The Louvre is another really good example. Unless you are an art buff and art is really your bread and butter, which is true for me. I would never be able to go to the Louvre and not go inside the Louvre. But I know that's not true for the majority of the world. And there's plenty to see from the outside. Works of art, statues, the gorgeous building, the gorgeous parks that surround it. So, make a list of your priorities. If art is a priority, then you want to go into a few museums. But if it's not, then you can say you've been to the Louvre just by going and seeing the Louvre. There's just as much to see outside. Most of these cities that we're talking about, if you're talking about Rome, Lisbon, Barcelona, Madrid, Paris, London, any real big city in Europe that you would want to go to, they're made to be, as I've said, they're outdoor museums. They're made to be enjoyed by foot and made to be opulent and impressive from the outside. So there's not always a need to pay to go inside. And it depends, again, on where you place your priorities. But I would say you could see most things in a European city without ever paying to go inside. There are also plenty of free museums. Almost all galleries are free on Thursday nights. In most parts of the world, Thursday nights is the unveiling day for new gallery exhibitions. So they'll set up all throughout the day on Thursday, and then Thursday evening, you can go and take a look at the new exhibition while enjoying some free wine, maybe some free snacks. So there are tons of ways to enjoy yourself without having to spend a ton of money. Walking tours, every city in Europe has free walking tours. Usually they're really good. They're based on tips, so they're not necessarily free. And then, it would be pretty miserly to not tip the guy after he walks you around for 2 or 4 hours. You pay what you feel it is worth. So Go on a free walking tour, pay whatever you can, and you'll be shown everything that there is to see from the outside. And again, this is a great way to figure out what is there to be seen from the outside. What might you want to pay to see on the inside? And there are also apps. There are tons of apps for free self-guided walking tours around the city. Some are really bad. It's a totally mixed bag, and it does take some troubleshooting to figure out if, to find the one that's good in the city that you're in, but they can be a great way to get started and just get you moving around the city. Those hop on, hop off bus tours that I was talking about before, I think they're a great value because you can pay a single rate, and for 24 hours you get to see the entire city. You can get off and get on again. Obviously, that's the whole point. But you can actually even use it as a form of transportation. In Malta, on my honeymoon there, it actually was one of the better ways to get across the island. One of the cheaper ways, because we had done a multi-day pass. And so instead of paying the bus fee to get across the island, we just took the hop on, hop off bus. It takes 2 or 3 times as long as it should take, but you get to see all the sights. You get to listen to the fun commentary and end up on the other side of the island eventually. So don't discount those. Those are a fantastic way to see everything that you could possibly want to see in 24 hours. Again, you're not going inside, but if you're not planning to go inside anyway, then why not just take a drive by? So those are basically all of my big tips. What you will sacrifice, as I've been saying this whole time, are on the big ticket items like museum entries, entertainment, going out to a concert or a nightclub, any of these things, those entry fees will add up. Obviously, museum and monument entries add up. But again, you don't need to. So here in Paris, when I said monument, immediately the Arc de Triomphe went to my head, or the Eiffel Tower. These are monuments, but is it worth the line and the wait and the entry fee to go up to the top? And in my opinion, it's not. The Eiffel Tower, maybe you get a nice view of the whole city. Same from the top of the Arc de Triomphe, but it depends. If you're a big war buff and you're really into that kind of history, then maybe the Arc de Triomphe is for you. If you're an architect, maybe going to the top of the Eiffel Tower is worth it for you. Or if you're a photographer and you want to get some amazing bird's eye views of the city. But for me, I'm perfectly happy to see them from ground height. Also, another thing to keep in mind is that if you're spending time in the places where the most famous sites are, then you're having to pay those market prices. So I'm taking Rome as an example because Rome is so compact and it's really hard to get away from anything historical in Rome. In Paris, I said this of Paris before, but in fact, in Paris, there's plenty of places to go that aren't touristy, that are purely residential. In Rome, it's very hard to find even a street that isn't in some way historical or monumental. And so if you're in Rome, if you're staying in the heart of Rome, in order to see all of those sites, you're going to pay the prices that you've got to pay to be in the heart of Rome, which means you're not going to get a pizza for less than 20 euros. Everything is going to be more expensive, more geared to tourists. I've had some of the worst Italian food of my life in Rome. I've also had one of the best meals of my life ever in Rome. So again, it's not that you are only going to eat microwave tourist crap, microwave tourist food when you're in these places, but you do have to do a little bit more legwork to get away from the tourist places, to find those little holes in the wall that are so good. And the best way to do that is through word of mouth, visit some blogs, visit some sites where people doing the same kind of travel that you are have talked about their trips. Look at expat blogs. That's another great insight. But the fact is, if you're staying in Rome, you're going to pay Roman prices. If you're in Paris and you're staying in the heart of the first arrondissement where all of those monuments are, you're going to pay those prices, or else you'll stay a little bit further away and have to pay for the commute. So it's just a bit of a give and a take. And I think the key is that to prioritize and make sure you know what it is you want to spend money on, because if you wanted to stay out of Rome and not see any of those monuments and churches and amazing historical sites, then you'd save hundreds of euros by going and doing other things in Italy that aren't necessarily Rome and priced as they would be in Rome. But you'll also miss out on everything there is to see, or else you'll spend the whole time counting pennies. So it is a give and a take, and you will spend money, but there is definitely a way to control your costs, even if you are a tourist in Europe. If you have any other questions or any other tips to add to offer our listeners, please do so. And remember that we post a new one of these videos every Saturday. So subscribe and stay tuned. Happy trails.